Welcome to Engaged Company Culture, a podcast directed at you, helping you to stop the employee exodus in your organization. This podcast has 3 different types of episodes. First, you have tips, tricks, observations, stories, research from me, Dr. Catherine Weiberg of Profitable Alignment. Second, interviews with other consultants, other coaches who are here to serve you so you can learn other tips and tricks to engaging your employees, to stop the employee exodus, to consciously create and continue a company culture where people want to be and where they encourage other people to come to work and to become your customers. Third, I interview other business leaders who have engaged company cultures and want to share their stories. You might learn from them how they have applied principles of company culture to increase their employee retention, increase their profits, increase their productivity, and increase everyone's job satisfaction. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. On today's show, I get to interview Heather Hansen, the author of Unmuted: How to Show Up, Speak Up, and Inspire Action. I have to tell you, I got super excited when Heather and I were talking before this interview, and I was learning all about what she put in Unmuted. And I was so excited to have her on the show. Heather, thank you so much for being here.
Dr. Catherine, I am so excited to be here. We had such a great chat before this, and I've been looking forward to today. So let's dive in. I can't wait.
Yes. I'm going to tell the audience just a little bit more about you. Heather is also the founder of Global Speech Academy, where she helps top global leaders show up, speak up, and inspire action in a changing world. Sound familiar? Sounds very much like the title of her Unmuted: How to Show Up, Speak Up, and Inspire Action book. She focuses on communication concepts and how each individual can be unmuted. Let's start there, if we may. What inspired you to write the book Unmuted? How does it apply to our audience?
Well, there were a few things that all came together at the same time. So first of all, I was getting a little bit frustrated I was a frustrated training provider, basically, where I get the call every year from HR ticking boxes. We need a presentation skills course, and we need an email writing course, and we need an empathy and building trust course. And can you come in for one day and fix our entire organization? And it's just so much more complicated than that, how we change communication and change the culture and transform an organization. So part of Unmuted was simply to give a more holistic view of what communication, especially in global companies, dispersed teams, remote work, what it really looks like and how we can change it. Then at the same time, I was looking around the world and feeling very disheartened with the leadership we see around us, with the state of our world. And I thought, this can't be the pinnacle of human potential. I just do not believe it. There's got to be better ideas out there. Where are they? And either we are not listening to them, or people are choosing not to speak up and share them. I actually believe a lot of it is more that we aren't hearing them. We're overlooking them. We aren't listening to them. And then, of course, the final icing on the cake was we had just entered the pandemic, and every single meeting I was on, there was someone saying, "You're on mute, you're on mute, you're on mute." Yes. And it made me realize, though, that even way before the pandemic, before Zoom calls, many people sat in meetings on mute. There are many, many people who have felt muted in their work, in their families, in their communities, in the world. And so all of those three factors sort of combined and made me feel like, you know what, this is really the right time. I was actually in the middle of writing a different book, an update of my first book, Powerful People Skills. I canceled the contract with the publisher, really burnt some bridges there, but I felt like this message was just so much more important and it needed to be in the world. So that's the story behind the book.
That is fantastic. Thank you. Now, audience, Heather mentioned a couple of times that she was looking at the global environment. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give you just a tiny bit of background. Heather grew up in California, spent, I believe, 4 years in Germany, married a man from Denmark, and now lives in Singapore. She has a pretty global view of the world. She's been paying attention and has really been evaluating what it looks like in a global economy and in global business.
Yeah. And I'll correct you just slightly because yes, I've worked and studied in Switzerland and Austria because I have a bachelor's in German along with international studies and language and society, but lived 8 years in Denmark. So I speak Danish fluently. My German's very rusty though. I can understand it, but I can't really get it out of my mouth anymore. So yeah, 8 years in Denmark and the rest of the time has been here in Singapore, but just over 20 years I've been abroad now. And it's really interesting, you know, having that upbringing in the American context and then living almost a decade in the European context and then coming out and living in a Southeast Asian life out here, it really gives you a lot of experience and you learn a lot about yourself and your own culture as well as so many others. So I love Singapore. It's incredibly international. Every conversation you're in is multicultural, multilingual. You know, we have dinner parties with people from 12 different countries that speak 15 different languages. It's so fascinating and exciting, especially from a communication perspective.
Well, and that's something I'd love to hear about. Are you seeing similarities in the cultures and in the type of muting?
The muting might have different triggers, but I think underneath it all, we're all the same in that we desperately want to feel that we belong somewhere. And we want to have our work and our ideas acknowledged. And we all want that. We want to belong. We want to feel included. I mean, this is why diversity and inclusion is just so very important right now. But unfortunately, we fail to look at the language and the linguistics around diversity and inclusion, which I feel is absolutely fundamental to every part of the DEI puzzle. And we aren't talking about it enough. We aren't recognizing it. So of course, there are cultural pieces that come into play, and many of them are very stereotypical. I shy away from the national or regional stereotypes of, oh, well, that everyone in the Asian office is so quiet and reserved and shy. No, they aren't. It's just that your Western leadership style of constantly talking and dominating the conversation, they can't even get in. And then there are some cultural issues around respect of what the boss says and hierarchy and power structures. But I would say that underneath it all, we all want the same things. And it's about how do we overcome these cultural and linguistic barriers to build that bridge and make everyone feel included and belong and feel inspired to share their ideas.
That is brilliant. I love that you led right into diversity, equity, and inclusion, because that's something that I wanted to bring out, is the kind of advice that you would give to somebody in a diversity, equity, and inclusion position, role, desire. And some of that you've already given with recognize that sometimes it's cultural, sometimes it's language, but to really be willing to listen and pay attention. Is there anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're missing in this DEI equation is the focus on the communication. So we're very focused on all the categories of race, ethnicity, age, sexuality, all of these things. And the one that we are missing is the language. And that underpins all of it, because the minute you pick up the phone and hear someone's voice, you've created all those categories in your mind. You've decided, I mean, all your listeners right now, if they're only listening to us, are thinking, what does Heather look like? How old is she? Where is she from in California, north or south? And what's her accent telling us? And you know, is she well educated? Is she not? Do I trust her? Does she sound credible? And you're making all of those decisions in the first second. And that's based on how I sound, how I speak, how my voice flows. And when you hear people with other accents or a foreign accent or even other regional accents within the United States, we have so many stereotypes about a Southern accent or a New Yorker or someone from New Jersey or Boston, all our little regional dialects, and they come with a lot of baggage. The Valley Girl in California, they come with a lot of baggage behind it, and we aren't paying attention to it. So if we want to make people feel like they belong and like they can speak up, then we need to address the massive elephant in the room, which is how people are being overlooked due to linguistic preferences that we carry and we aren't even aware of. And that's a big, big piece that's missing right now in the DEI conversation, and one that I really do get on my soapbox about. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity because I think it's very important.
Well, I am looking forward to the book that you're planning to write on linguistic bias. The audience hasn't heard anything about it till this moment, but I am seriously looking forward.
This is the next big project, and it's the big passion project right now, is to really bring these ideas mainstream, to show how linguistic bias and discrimination is showing up in the workplace, in healthcare, in housing, in education. We even see it the way that professors get evaluated by their students. And people think it's okay to say, I don't like their communication, their accent's too heavy. I don't like going to lectures with them. They're too hard to understand. That is somehow still acceptable to say. And everyone goes, oh yeah, you're right. We need to work. They need to work on that. Whereas you could never say, I don't want an Indian lecturer, or I don't want a Chinese lecturer, but that's actually what you're saying in the same words. So the tie there between language and race and, just that constant feeling of, even when I lived in Denmark, this is where I realized this was such an issue, because I was born into a very privileged language, right? I speak English with what many people would say is a very general American accent. I'm understood all over the world. I have incredible privilege, and we need to identify that as well. Then I go to Denmark. I speak fluent Danish. No one takes me seriously. People tell me in the middle of a business meeting, my accent's so charming. Oh, you're so cute, right? And I'm going, hold on, you would never speak to me like that if we were speaking English. Would you prefer we do this in English? Oh, no, your accent's so charming. We love it. We want to hear you talk some more. That is so humiliating when you hear it all the time in a business setting, and people are going through this every single day, and they don't have the option of saying, hey, let's do this in my native language for once and let me get my power back. So these are the issues that we need to start recognizing and discussing.
Thank you. That is so fantastic. And I admit, I have been guilty of recognizing people's accents. I try not to say adorable or anything that might sound diminutive. But I will comment on, I love your accent. I think it's beautiful.
I know. And usually, even the people in the business meeting, they weren't trying to offend me. They were honestly being nice and trying to support and encourage me and say, we love the way you sound and we support you. That's actually what they were trying to do. And this is the case with a huge number of microaggressions on all different aspects of this diversity continuum. People really do have the best intentions. They think they're being inclusive, but when you're on the receiving end and you hear it every day, I came to the realization that I could live in Denmark the rest of my life, and I would never just be seen as myself. I would always be the other. I'd always be the American. I would always be the outsider. And that gets really hard to deal with, because I would never be able to get rid of that accent. People think that you can just drop an accent and, oh, he's lived here 40 years and he still has an accent. Yeah, that's how it works. You can't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to sound American. It doesn't work like that. And somehow we believe that's how language works, but it doesn't. So there's a lot of myths around language and speaking and what we're capable of. And it's not easy. It's not easy. But people do have the best intentions. And that's also why we don't recognize this, because we don't see it as a problem, especially the people who do not experience it. I didn't realize it was a problem until I was living it. And so especially for us, the English speakers, we're like, no, that's not a problem here. And I'm like, how do you know? How do you know it's not a problem here? You know, if race isn't a problem and sexuality is a problem and ability is a problem and neurodiversity is a problem, what makes you think that language isn't a problem? Because it's underpinning all of it, right? But we just don't see it yet. We aren't aware of it. Yeah.
That is brilliant. And I love that you recognize that you did not recognize it as a problem until it was turned on you. I lived in the Philippines for a year and a half, and I had not been a minority to that magnitude prior to this. I spent 6 months in Russia and I was a minority there, but I didn't look like the minority. When I was in the Philippines, I was visibly a minority. It was fascinating. It was also frustrating because exactly what you said, but it was fascinating to be on the other side.
Yeah,
To
it
see
is.
that, oh my goodness, is this what people who are in the minority in my locale feel like? Where it's, I'm just being noticed for my hair, or I'm being noticed for my fair skin, and I want to be as pale as you, but I want to be as dark as you. And
isn't it funny, huh?
yes, and being told, oh, you have such a funny accent, or you have a cute accent. When I first started speaking Tagalog, people wondered, are you Russian? You have such an interesting accent. And then as I worked on it, then people began to ask, are you German?
Oh, interesting.
And then it came to American. I was in my 20s.
Well, the last guess is American, because a lot of Americans do not have the interest or the need to go and learn foreign languages, right? So usually American is the last guess, because we're really not great about taking the interest and finding the motivation to learn other languages. And I say the UK is the same. Australia would be very similar as well. You know, when we're born into English, we don't really need to learn other languages and cultures, or at least that's what we believe. But I think that's really shifting very, very quickly. And I'd also just add, you know, the difference between your experience of being the minority in Asia versus the experience of minorities in the US. Although there are similarities, there are also some really huge differences, because being the white minority, we still have tremendous power in the hierarchy, in the, you know, the post-colonial systems like the Philippines or Singapore or India, where still the white Westerner is the highest rank, no matter where you go and what you do. And it's typically the Westerners. Yeah. So even though you are the minority, you will always get the respect and the honor of being from the Western world, and you will be idolized for that because of this lingering post-colonialism inferiority complex that we see throughout this entire region. So yes, you do end up experiencing that and having that backlash and feeling like the minority, and you're put in those situations, yet at the same time you maintain power and control, which is a quite different experience than most minorities would feel the other way around. But it is good. I think that's why I think it's so important to travel and live in different places, so that you have a better understanding of these experiences and then can also recognize the differences with them, right? But it's a very complex subject. It really is.
It is. And you make a wonderful point, because I was still honored as the white girl. In truth, I didn't like it.
No.
It didn't.
It's an uncomfortable feeling. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you're right, because I still had that you're a white American girl privilege.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very, very clear on the fact that a huge reason why I was able to build a very successful business here in Asia from a very young age was because I was the white Western. Even being a woman, if I was a man, I'd probably be even more successful. But even as a woman, I was walking into C-suites. I was 27 years old. I think they probably thought I was 10 years older. They typically will think I'm 10 years older than I am. I typically think they're 10 years younger than they are. And that's really, really typical. And so I believe they thought I was much older than I was. And I carried a sense of maturity and confidence from my American upbringing. So there's no local 27-year-old who could have walked into those C-suites offering the services I was offering at the rates I was offering and built up my business so quickly. And it's very, very clear to me the privilege I had in those situations and still have. And it's a big kind of hypocrisy of my career that I'm dealing with all the time, every day, right? Of okay, I've built this business based on privilege, and yet I'm trying to help the underprivileged. And how does this work? Like it's this constant struggle for me internally. But I am very, very aware of it.
And that's what it takes to be aware. It goes back to emotional intelligence and recognizing who you are, why you are who you are, and then adding a level of appreciative intelligence, which is one of my favorite topics.
Yes. Oh, I love that too.
And look at what do you want to do about it?
Yeah. And I feel like there's a responsibility that we have when we're in this position, right? And I think that's why I'm so set on writing about this, speaking about it, being on as many podcasts as possible, taking advantage of every opportunity to spread this message, because I know that I have a privilege where people might listen to me before they listen to others, which goes right back to the whole underlying linguistic bias that is very closely related to race and everything else. But it goes back to that linguistic bias where I know people will hear me better than they will hear others. So I feel a responsibility to talk about this and talk about these issues so that people will listen, and so that I can hopefully get people to start listening better to other voices that don't sound like me. But I feel like those of us with the privilege are the ones who really need to fight for that and be allies in that. And so I guess that's how I kind of rationalize my situation and get the passion to keep moving forward.
I love it. So what advice would you give to other business leaders?
First of all, we need to institutionalize this. So we need to be including language and linguistic issues in our DEI policies, and we need to begin raising awareness around this issue at work. We are not talking about it. It's still very accepted and it's hidden. It's just a hidden bias. So we have to start, totally unconscious. And we need to start understanding it. I'm just this year, I've been talking about this over a decade. Only this year have companies actually begun hiring me to talk about it. So that's why my whole business has been based on helping the minorities to, fix them, to fit into our Western model, to speak up and to be confident and to communicate in a way that makes us more comfortable. That's where my business has been focused, because that's the only thing people would pay for. And yet I've been banging my drum saying, but listen, you're a problem too. We need to look at you and we need to talk about your role in this. And it's only now with the diversity inclusion movement we've seen over the last maybe 3 to 5 years that this is finally coming to the table. So as leaders, we've got to start talking about it. We need to get it into the policies. We need to have it on the forms for hiring managers that accent bias is an issue. Please be aware of this. Do not make any decisions based on language or accent. That we have studies, just recent studies out of the UK that show just that little raising awareness makes a massive difference in the hiring decisions. So we need to start changing this. And the first step is awareness. So from a leadership perspective, it's about understanding this, being more aware of it, identifying your own biases, which is a very difficult process and you need a lot of self-awareness, and it takes a lot of work. And I'm sure I haven't uncovered all of my accent biases. I'm very clear on several of them. And even I have them, having lived everywhere, experienced it myself. You cannot escape it. It's there. So we really need to become more aware and get it into policy and start training across the board, raising awareness, and making sure that every voice is heard. So even putting in communication policies in place or little toolkits. When the pandemic hit, we started working with companies to put together virtual communication toolkits. So how do we run our online meetings? How do we expect people to show up? How do we take turns? How do we ensure everyone is heard? What are the pre-meeting steps that we take? What do we do post-meeting? What do we do with agendas and with notes? And How do we ensure that everyone's ideas are on the table? And so focusing on that communication, making it an integral part of the culture of the company is the only way to increase the innovation, the teamwork, the collaboration, and also to make the best use of our talents. Because right now I can guarantee in large organizations, leadership is overlooking the best talent. They are not using them to the best of their ability. They're not hearing them. And it's really sad to see. We just aren't reaching our potential because we aren't taking advantage of the unique talents of our people. And that's the whole reason we hired them. So let's listen to them. Let's use their skills and talents and brilliance to move forward.
I love especially that last little bit that you said. Of course, I love it all, but the last little bit that you said, that we hired people for what they bring. It's not just because of their job description and, oh, we can check the boxes, going back through several parts of this conversation, but it's what else do they bring in and of themselves? And we need to envelop the entire person, lean on their strengths, lean on their skills, find out what can they bring from outside of work that enhances who they are at work and how they show up. Now, you have an entire unmuted framework that can work with this linguistic bias and can work with other parts of communication. Will you share with us your unmuted framework and share how it supports a company culture where every voice is heard?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking. That's an important part of the puzzle. If you imagine a 3-part Venn diagram, we love our Venn diagrams, right? So the first circle is conscious communication. So this is looking at cultural intelligence, conscious listening, improving listening skills, knowing yourself, being self-aware. The first chapter of the book is who are you? It's all about self-awareness, knowing what your values are. Are you actually living your values, or do you just say, my values are integrity and respect, but then your actions don't really show that? Right. So we talk a lot about self-discovery, awareness in conscious communication. Then the second circle is confident communication. And this is both skills confidence and self-confidence, because you need both. And okay, the self-confidence piece, that's not my specialty. That's a therapist. That's a very specific type of coach who's going to help you to build your self-worth. If you truly believe that your ideas are not good enough, then that's something you need to work on. But from the skills confidence perspective, I can help to build that self-confidence by improving your skill set. So we talk about how to use your voice effectively, how to show up on camera, how to overcome your expression anxiety, because I don't call it speaking anxiety, because I think it comes up equally in writing as well. When I'm writing a book, I have a lot of expression anxiety. Anytime you're putting your ideas out there, so many people shy away from LinkedIn, so scared to put something out there. So it's not just speaking, it's also your writing and emails and writing reports. And so it comes out everywhere. And so that's the confident communication piece. And then the final circle is connected communication. That's looking at the relationships, building empathy, psychological safety, and belonging. So how do we make everyone feel like they're included? And we need equal parts of these 3 circles to truly unmute an organization. Because if we have a lacking circle, like for example, we're confident and we're connected, but we're not conscious, those voices become too loud. They're the ones that are dominating the discussion, not on purpose. They're just very confident and they feel good in the environment and they feel like they belong. They're just sharing, and they probably don't even realize they're talking over people, and they don't realize, they assume that, well, if they had something to say, they'd say it. It's not always that simple. So those loud voices.
So would they.
Yeah, exactly. Because this is how it is for me. Why wouldn't it be like that for everyone else? And because they're lacking that cultural intelligence. And I mean it from a small c culture. It doesn't mean Germany versus Japan. It can be male versus female. It can be 55 versus 35. It can be all different small microcultural differences that make up our personalities and who we are. Yes, exactly. HR versus finance and the differences in the way we think and our priorities, right? So it's that consciousness is so important. And then, we have people who are conscious and connected, but they're lacking that confidence. It could be due to language or just they don't know how to give a good presentation. They don't feel confident in that. So they turn down their volume. They're too soft. Their voices are too soft. They aren't being heard. Yet they have everything it takes, and they're the ones pressing mute and sort of self-selecting and removing themselves from the conversation. And then the worst of all are the people who are conscious and confident, but they don't feel connected. They don't feel like they belong. They don't feel like they're acknowledged. They don't feel like they're appreciated. And they press mute, and they are on mute, fully on mute. And they've given up, and they say, forget it. Like, I'm tired of trying. I'm just going to go through my workday, do my work, and that's that. And I'm not going to do anything extra. I'm not going to share my bright ideas because no one's listening to me anyway, or because when I speak up, someone else takes credit for it anyway. And I've been burned too many times. And these are the people we're at risk of completely losing from the company. When we talk about the great resignation and reshuffle and all of that, these are the people who are leaving, and they're taking their friends with them because they're very good, empathetic, conscious communicators. So they do have good relationships, even though they may feel rejected by the company culture. They're going to take others with them. So that's how this framework works. And so when I go into any organization, I'm looking at, first of all, we're doing assessments to find out where are we now, right? Where do people fit in this? What percentage of the company is actually on mute right now? What is your risk that you have? And, it's very typical. I'll go into an organization and there will be 20 to 30% that are on mute. That's incredibly scary, that 20% of your staff and employees aren't contributing, aren't sharing their ideas. What are they doing there? And they're feeling unappreciated. And so this is a massive problem. And I do believe that it starts by looking at the communication that's happening, the connection, the cultural intelligence, all the pieces of the puzzle, not just bringing me in to do a 2-day presentation skills course. That's not going to cut it. That's not going to push the needle or make any changes. This is a long-term process and transformation that we need to help a company move through and build from the ground up.
You said so many things that I wanted to make sure that I come back to. I love the expression anxiety. That rings true to me. And I can look at it and say, oh, that explains this and this and this.
Yeah, me
and
too.
Just like you were saying, that's something that can affect everybody in a different way. And that is a unifying example in my mind.
Yeah, native or non-native speaker, Western or Eastern, that doesn't matter. I have extreme expression anxiety, and I fear the judgment and the feedback and the criticism. And I think this is a basic human condition. It has nothing to do with where you're from. I mean, we can all come together and agree on that. And it affects some people more than others, of course, but it's there under the surface.
And another, I completely agree. Another thing that you talked about was those who are on mute, that they don't feel connected and they don't feel valued. Gallup did a poll in 2019 that showed that 34% of the employee population is extremely disengaged. They're on mute. What you described directly parallels when you said 20 to 30%. And
you're absolutely right. That's a great point.
It's insane. Yes, those are the people you're going to lose. Either they're going to leave the company and take people with them, or they're going to be so disengaged that eventually you might invite them to go somewhere else, or things will just start not happening very much because they feel like they're not valued. They don't feel like they can innovate. They don't feel like their contribution matters. So they're highly disengaged.
Yeah, they feel like their skill set isn't being utilized.
Exactly.
And what is more demotivating than that? You know that you have a talent, you're there for a reason, you want to do good in the world, you want to do good for the company, and they just aren't utilizing your skill set appropriately because they haven't recognized what your skill set really is. They haven't taken the time to hear you and acknowledge you and recognize you. And so it's very easy to switch off and become demotivated and disengaged.
Oh, I want everybody to get your book.
Thank you.
Unmuted, and then the one that follows.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. So if somebody wants to reach out to you, what is the best way? All your links are going to be in the show notes, but what's the best way for somebody to reach out to Heather Hansen?
I think the best and my favorite way is over LinkedIn. I'm quite active there and I love connecting with people and engaging in conversations. I love learning about what other people are doing in this space as well. So I would love to connect on LinkedIn. Otherwise, my corporate website is globalspeechacademy.com. That talks about a lot of the training solutions we offer, the programs that we run. And my author site is heatherhansen.com. So that's where you'll learn all about Unmuted and the book and my projects I'm working on, my keynote talks. So any of these places, I'd love to connect.
Fantastic. Of all of the wonderful things that we've touched, and we've touched on so many, what is the main thing you want people to remember from this conversation? And if there's something we've missed, you can toss that in here.
Oh, wow. That's a big question. I think the most important thing we need to do at this stage is start listening. We need to start listening. So if you take anything from the conversation, I hope people will reevaluate how they're listening to others, where they might be turning off without knowing it, zoning out without knowing it, not realizing that you're not taking someone as seriously as maybe you should. And why is that exactly? And try to dig a little deeper and understand that. But I hope people will go back into their meetings and really take a step back to make space for others and really listen to every voice in the room, give every voice a chance and an opportunity. And I think you'll be very surprised with what comes out of your team and the people that are around you every day that you hadn't even realized was there. And I think that's the first step for all of us.
That is beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. I also have a little worksheet to help people recognize and to ask themselves questions in meetings mentally. Who's participating? Who isn't participating? Does the mood change when a certain person speaks or walks in? It in my mind goes hand in hand with your.
It does, absolutely.
And so that got me pretty excited.
Oh.
You and I could talk for hours and hours and hours. Thank you so much for being here. I hope everybody who listens or views gets anywhere near as much enjoyment as I have had.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. This has been a fantastic conversation. I love all of our conversations, and I can't wait to continue the conversation with you. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be on your show.
Thank you, Heather. And thank you, everybody who's listening. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, follow. Let people know about Engaged Company Culture podcast and about Global Speech Academy. Listen to Heather and listen to yourselves and those around you. Thank you. Thank you for listening to or viewing today's Engaged Company Culture episode. I hope you have enjoyed the episode. I hope you have learned something and have something that you can apply today to engage your company culture and encourage your employees to enjoy work, looking forward to Mondays instead of only looking forward to Fridays. If you liked this episode, please share it with someone else you know. Also, like and subscribe to Engaged Company Culture anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thank you and have a wonderful day.